the Mayo Experience.
That Mayo Experience. That Mayo Experience. That Mayo Experience. Experience.
Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience presented by DraftKings 2021 Week 1 rankings by position. You want to jump to a ranking, you hit the time codes and figure all of that out. Remember to smash the like button to the episode. Subscribe to Mayo Media Network. And in the comment section, you give me your favorite undervalued, cheap, waiver wire quarterback who's going to have an explosive Week 1. I want to know who that guy is because maybe I'll play him on DraftKings. And if you want to play on DraftKings, the best tournament you can play in is the Pat Mayo Experience Listeners League. $15 to play, 3 max entry. And here's the caveat. There is no rake for that tournament, so all of the money goes to everyone in the pool. DraftKings is not taking a cut. You can find that link in the description of this video. There's 5,000 spots, and trust me, they're going to fill quickly, so you best get your spots right now. Okay? Additionally, I got some money to give to you. Right now, I got $1,000, but that can go up. So I'm going to give away $250 installments to people who do this. So what you need to do is subscribe to Mayo Media Network. You do that. That takes like 3 seconds. On YouTube, you get a ballot in the draw. The second way to earn the ballot is subscribe to the Pat Mayo Experience audio podcast. And then on Apple Podcasts, the link is down in the description to make it easy on you. Leave a 5-star review, something you enjoy about the show, your Twitter handle, or email address, so I can contact you if you're a winner. We get 100 reviews. I'll bump that up to $1,500. We get 200 reviews, $2,000 to give away, and we'll be doing that on the Week 2 Spread Pick Show, which will come out on Wednesday morning of that week. For the 8th year in a row, Jake Ciely from theathletic.com is joining me to dissect my rankings. Of course, you can find all of his rankings up on theathletic.com. You can find mine down in the description, just a very quick hyperlink, or if you're ever looking for them, they're on dknation.com. I'll also have the early release in the Mayo Media newsletter, free to join. That's also down in the, just check out the description. There's a lot of stuff down there, cash giveaways, all the fun stuff, all the links to where you need to go to win some of this, to find the rankings, and I'll have them updated. I'll do a re-up next week because normally this show is going to come out on Tuesday, late afternoon, early evening throughout the course of football season. But hey, it's Week 1. I want to talk about Week 1. You want to know about Week 1. So that is what we are going to do. Jake Ciely, you know what my favorite thing has been so far as it goes to Week 1?
What's that been?
When I was making my rankings, the new site runthesims.com has the player comparison tool where you can look at like one player versus another player in a graph and their range of outcomes. I'm just like punching in players like, oh, I want to see what the distribution of upside versus floor really is for this. I feel like it's really making my decision-making process a whole lot better. So I need to be up with you because you're one of the best fantasy rankers around, one of the most accurate. I want to get up to your level.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, what do you even need me for at this point? I was surprised it's been 8 years. Oh, you can't even see us. I have a This Is the Way shirt because this is what we do. This is the way to get your rankings correct every single year as you and I talk together. And hey, don't besmirch yourself, Pat. It's not like you've never changed my opinion before.
Yeah, but it's usually for the worse is the problem. I can be very convincing. I'm just wrong.
You've made some very, very valid points throughout the years. Has it really been 8 years? Did you count back? Has it been that long?
I did. It's been 8 years of you and I doing this show from the audio version to the video version.
Wow. Good times.
Yeah,
we'll make it. We have to do something in 2 years for 10. Are you going to come down to the States?
I mean, I'll be down in this. I'll probably see you in Vegas in February once football season is over. So maybe we can do something fun from there. Or maybe for Week 1 one year, I'll fly you up if you can handle that. And we can do the show in studio. Once I'm in a temp studio right now, and my new studio is being built. So expect a change in that at some point during the course of the football season. But I want to thank everyone for coming into Mayo Media Network, joining us for the 8th consecutive year. And if you want all of the tools, there are free tools, there are premium tools. But if you just want to do some research, runthesims.com is amazing. And even the Advanced Stats Hub, which is completely free, you can go use to look at your market shares, your targets, and everything like that, and really dig into the weekend. If you want the daily optimizer, the custom game simulations, the player prop tools, the player comparison, runthesims.com/Mayo will get you the discount off of that. So I highly recommend it. I've wasted enough time. Jake, let's talk about running backs, the rankings for Week 1. All my season-long rankings are up at DK Nation as well. They'll be updated throughout the course of next week if you're still doing drafts, but I've moved on. I'm talking Week 1 now. Rankings down in the description. Let's get to them. We got No surprise. Christian McCaffrey at number 1, Kamara at number 2, Dalvin Cook, Derrick Henry, Nick Chubb at number 5, Aaron Jones, number 6, Austin Eckler, number 7, Najee Harris, number 8, Chris Carson, number 9, and Antonio Gibson, number 10, at home against the Los Angeles Chargers. These are for half-point PPR settings. You got some problems? I want to hear them.
So I got some problems. Look, it's going to be always hard. We do this every single week. It's always hard to nitpick in top 10, but it really comes down to 11 and 12 for me. We haven't gotten to them yet. There's 2 guys that I would kick inside the top 10 and 2 guys that would barely get kicked out of there, and one of them being Chris Carson. And it's not that I don't like Chris Carson. We make the argument every single year. When Chris Carson is healthy, Chris Carson is dominant, but Ezekiel Elliott's also dominant. And Joe Mixon, I know it was inefficient, but I had this debate with somebody. I just released a My Guys article, and what I was bringing up Najee Harris with the volume argument for Joe Mixon. Not saying Joe Mixon's one of my guys, but they're like, oh, Joe Mixon was terrible last year outside the one good game with Jacksonville. It's like, okay, well, that still counts. We can't just take the game away from him. And then they scored between 7 and 15 for the 4 other games. But here's the biggest part of it. He averaged 23 touches per game last year in those, and that's even before this whole not coming off the field. And I know there's questions, but Minnesota's defense doesn't scare me at all. Again, I'm nitpicking, but it would be Joe Mixon and Zeke over Carson and Antonio Gibson, because just the Gibson use, I don't know which way to go with this. Like they demoted Peyton Barber. He got signed to the practice squad. They have Jarrett Patterson, who they keep sprinkling in, but it's that passing game. You know, are they going to let Gibson get unleashed or what free Antonio Gibson or whatever? I don't want to say I want to wait a whole week, but the Chargers defense definitely scares me more than the Vikings defense. Chargers have a good defense. So it's, again, I'm nitpicking, but it'd be your 9 and 10 switched for your 11 and 12.
Okay, I don't know if I'll make that change right now, but I could be talked into it as the course of the week goes on. With Mixon, it's a volume play. I just think that Najee Harris is a better running back, at least in this moment of time, and I'm just very unconcerned about
I'll leave Harris there.
Yeah, listen, I just think I know that he's going to get all of the goal line work on that team. It feels like he's a 3-down back, whereas Mixon is as well, but that feels like a more pass-heavy offense, and I think that even the spread, when you look at it, it's being deflated because Minnesota is a 3-point favorite on the road in Cincinnati. I think that should probably be a little bit higher, which will just lead me to Joe Burrow is going to be passing a lot. I have him projected to throw the most passes of any quarterback in the NFL this season. And then it really comes down to the determination of how many passes is Joe Mixon going to catch, because that's going to be a big part of his value this year. If they're going to be down in games and passing a lot, can he get 4, 5, 6 targets per game? Maybe. And I mean, that's why I have him ranked at number 11 for the week, and I had him at number 12
right.
going into the year. But I'm still a bit wishy-washy on it. Like, I know that Harris is going to do those things, and that's why I'm just comparing those two as a bell cow back. With Eckler, like, I know the amount of targets he's going to get. His floor is pretty safe. With Gibson, I know he's probably going to control, I mean, I don't know. He's probably going to control the goal line work. Getting rid of Barber was actually huge for me. I do know that J.D. McKissick is still going to have a role in the passing game, but it does seem like Barber is going to at least see an uptick from what I see. And the Chargers defense is good, but I think that they're a better pass defense, both in coverage and pass rush, than an actual rush defense.
Sure. But to go to that point, that's where I was saying, is Antonio Gibson's upside, is it going to be in the passing game? Because that's also where they are better, is even to the running backs, and just their passing game in general. So again, not a big nitpick. My biggest one, as soon as I looked at your rankings, and again, what do we do this? We talk about this a lot, Pat. You're starting these guys anyway, and especially right now. You know, maybe down the road, there's more options. You made trades and stuff like that. But it's hard to get away from who you drafted, although there is somebody in your next set of 10 that I like. You might be shocked to say I think he's not way too high, but there's a good chunk of guys behind him I feel more confident in week 1.
All right, well, that's a nice tease. I do want to let people know Mayo Media Network is running a gigantic season-long props contest. And, Jake, you should get in on this as well, because people can play against me. They can play against you.
I do.
It's through Prize Picks, so you have to go sign up for Prize Picks. And if you use code MMN, you get like a deposit match up to $100. Or I have the link down in the description. You just use the link, go through. You'll get that $100 deposit match as well. But essentially what it is you pick 5 fantasy props every single week. It could be a fantasy score. It could be rushing rushing yards, receiving yards, passing yards, touchdowns. You pick the over, you pick the under, but you have to pick 5 of them per week. And on your entry has to be for $7.11 per week. And then there's prizes. Once you enter as $7.11, you're automatically in the Mayo Media Network pool. That's how it registers. So even if you have a Prize Picks account, you don't need to sign up through us. You can just play in it that way. But I mean, you get your deposit match if you sign up through us. So it's like free money. So for the course of the year, it's like $128 to play over the course of 18 weeks. It's $7.11 a week. So you get paid out on your Prize Picks if you win anyway, but if you get 5 for 5 every single week, you get a bonus $50. If you have the most right of anyone who's playing in the competition at the end of the year, you win $3,000. You come second, you win $1,500. You come third, you win $1,000. You come in dead last, you get a bonus $100, Jake. And it's just a fun way for all of us to interact. And some people they don't have sports betting legalized in their state, or they're not high stakes players. I feel like this is a way where it opens it up to way more people, because Prize Picks is available in a lot of places, and it's not a huge investment from people. I think people can swing the $7.11 a week to come show how much more they know on a week-to-week basis than you and I.
I think that would be really fun. By the way, do you really love 7-Eleven hot dogs or something like that? Like, where did this come from, 7-Eleven?
I believe football starts on 7-Eleven.
Oh.
No, wait, that doesn't make any sense, because it doesn't start in
I was
June.
going to say, that doesn't make
I don't know. I think it's just catchy. That's why we came up with it.
Is that what it is? All right, I'll go with that. It's catchy. We'll call that the reason why.
Well, how about this? It's a 7-Eleven because it's open to everyone.
Oh, boom. There you go.
Yeah, and it's easy to remember, but you have to make the entry for $7.11. That's the trigger that entry of that amount with the 5 picks registers for the contest.
Did you just say trigger? You said triggered on the first show, and it wasn't even intentional.
Now, there we are. So again, prizepicks.com, code MMN, or the link in the description. Go do that right now and come compete against Jake and I. Next series of 10. You mentioned Joe Mixon. He's at number 11. Ezekiel Elliott, number 12. JT, Jonathan Taylor. Not Jonathan Taylor Thomas, just Jonathan Taylor. So just JT, not a JTT. Saquon Barkley, Gus Bus. Edwards at Las Vegas at number 15. James Robinson, Mike Davis, Clyde Edwards, Eliel, Damian Harris at 19, and Miles Sanders at number 20. I'm curious who it is. Who's the guy who's too high? Is it Edwards or Robinson?
It's neither.
Is it D.
The
Harris?
guy right in front of both of them.
Oh,
no.
It's Barkley. You think Barkley's too high?
I can't. Week 1, man. Look, I'm the person who's been campaigning to say I'll take Barkley at the end of the first round still, because I did it on your very show. And I even prefaced it with an injury is different than a suspension, but Le'Veon Bell's suspended season still finishes RB3, still was RB1 in fantasy points per game. Saquon Barkley 2 years ago still narrowly beat Christian McCaffrey in a points per game. We all know Barkley's upside. Let's also remember last year that even before getting hurt, that offensive line was so miserable that looked pretty poor getting out of the gate despite all of his touches. He hasn't played yet. We don't know what his workload's going to be in week 1, and it's a bad matchup on top of it. I don't know where you drafted Barkley and you could bench him, maybe unless you went with the Gus Bus situation, and now you have Barkley, Edwards, and maybe you went with Mixon, like maybe you did Barkley, Mixon to start and you got Edwards later, and that might be the only case, but I have more confidence in Edwards. Not even a question in my mind about that one, especially with the workload on that team. James Robinson, workload. Mike Davis, workload. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I probably slide him down behind Edwards-Helaire and right in front of Damian Harris. Just, again, I know you probably can't bench Barkley, but I have so many concerns about what is week 1 going to be. Is it even 15 carries? And if it's 15 carries, is it 15 carries for 45 yards because this offensive line is still trash?
It is. This was the trickiest one to do, and I thought that I would be sort of an outlier of having him too low, considering he was someone who was drafted as a top 10 running back, and having him outside of that for week 1 seemed low for me, but I was just kind of hedging. I'm good with bumping him down because we don't know what the situation is going to be, and maybe this is where the Wednesday update to the rankings, when I shoot that video, I'll have a better sense of how the Giants are going to use Saquon Barkley and what his role might be, because if it's like, oh yeah, he's going to play 80% of the snaps. Like, okay, then he's like a top 10 guy again all of a sudden. But I don't know how much we can trust that going in. It's a really tricky situation. And I don't know how you get away from starting him. Like, even if, let's say, you drafted Barkley, then waited at running back, and you had Gus Edwards and not Damian Harris to go with him. Let's say you had Mostert and Gus Edwards. Like, are you really going to bench Saquon for Raheem Mostert? Like, I could see it. I don't know if I'd do it.
Against Detroit?
Yeah, even against Detroit. Like, I think that's a great matchup. But at the same time, like, if Barkley is playing a limited amount of snaps, he still might play more snaps than Mostert does.
He might, and I think that's where the intriguing one comes down to is Mostert's a good one to throw out there. Miles Sanders, I still probably go Barkley for the upside because their touches might be similar. We've talked about Miles Sanders and the fact that Philly has told us nothing, but they are concerned about him in the passing game. You don't keep Boston Scott on the roster, draft Kenneth Gainwell, and not tell me that you're concerned about Miles Sanders in the passing game. So he's in that similar conversation of what that workload is, and that's where I would lean towards Barkley just because we know what Barkley could be. Although, again, we could go out week one. He's easily, even when including Mostert, like if we went down to Mostert, Sanders, Montgomery, right around there, like I think you could argue Barkley still has the lowest floor, and that's what you have to know what you're getting into. If you want to say, look, I don't want to lose week one from Saquon Barkley getting 2 points, I'm not going to do that, but I could see you making that case because week one you do have more options, and that was one of my reasons behind Barkley is that the first 3 or 4 weeks, it's much easier to find a replacement option than it is weeks 9, 10, 11, and I know what Barkley should, we don't know for sure, but should be come October. But that being said, if you wanted to bench him for Damian Harris, again, that Damian Harris is speculative workload we're assuming, but we'll be really surprised if Belichick... There's a world we live in, Pat. Tell me there's a non-zero chance that like J.J. Taylor leaves that backfield and touches week one.
Oh, it's going to be fun because I'll be like, you know what? I'll play like a sneaky James White and pick up some Mac Jones little dump offs. Maybe he'll end up with like 5, 6, 7 catches. And that's a great way to really establish my floor. And then all of a sudden he plays one snap and J.J. Taylor's the guy. And it's like, oh, fantastic news. This is great. Or Stevenson is all of a sudden the goal line back and not Harris. Like, oh, God, why did I fall for this? I'm hoping that's not the case. I have faith in Damian Harris, but it's always in the back of your mind. It's like anything with Kyle Shanahan. It's like, it's in the back of your mind that this might not work out.
Stevenson and J.J. Taylor, I imagine, are min price, aren't they? And they're on the main slate.
Yeah, well, James White's only $4,400 as well.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, man, this is...
I'll have the full DraftKings picks for week one out on Thursday. But I think you bring an interesting point to the floor versus ceiling conversation. Because I do think that the ceiling for Barkley is higher than a lot of these guys. Because I did move him down. I moved him down behind Clyde Edwards-Helaire. That makes him number 18 in the rankings. When people hit the description, click on running backs. That's where he's going to appear as the time of this show release. Maybe that will change throughout the course of the week. But like I said, I'll be doing an update on that. But then you get into these next level of guys. And that's why I find that the runthesims.com tools are so helpful, is because I can punch in Saquon. I can run that game versus Denver simulation 10,000 times with, increased injury, increased workload, decreased workload. And then I can just have a graph of, his floor is substantially lower than someone like Miles Sanders, but the upside is still on the uptick versus Miles Sanders when I compare the two together. It gives me my range of outcomes. Like, what's a 10th percentile outcome? What's an 80th percentile outcome? But what's the median outcome at that? And my rankings aren't projections at the same time. My rankings basically devolve into if all of these guys were on my team, in which order would I play them in? And sometimes I buck the projection. Sometimes I want to go with my gut. That's why they're my rankings, and it's not a projection list. You want the projection list, head over to Run the Sims. It's like what you do too. Like, you have your projections, but you don't necessarily always follow those projections.
No, and that's why, the perfect example is what I did this year. I had that customizable cheat sheet where, first of all, you could say your rankings are dumb. I don't like your projections. Well, actually, my projections are dumb. You don't like them. But even my projections are a different rank than my rankings because this is how I would draft. Sure, they spit out projection-wise this, and this, but it's the same in the draft as you will do week 1, 2, 3, 4, week 17. You're going to be doing it differently depending on what you want at the position. And some of these situations, whether I'm drafting or whether I'm starting them in my lineup, as you always say, Pat, I'm not shooting for 4th place. Well, any given week in my fantasy league, I'm not aiming to hopefully beat my opponent by 2 points. I want my team to win, and I don't want to leave this, little wiggle room because I feel safer about it. I'm just going to start my potential best players. So that's where my rankings, again, will always differ, and that's why you'll see that. Projections and rankings are two different things.
21-30 in the week 1 running back rankings. At number 21, my guy, Colonel Mostert. Sideshow Raheem, he's at number 21. I do like him a lot this year. Montgomery, Flea Market at number 22. Javonte Williams was one of the harder guys to rank, him and Swift. I have at 23 and 24, so the lowest end of running back 2 that you can get in a 12-team league. Darrell Henderson, Ronald Jones, Myles Gaskin, Kareem Hunt, Chase Edmonds, and Josh Jacobs. It's not that I'm that low on Josh Jacobs throughout the course of the year. I just think that Baltimore is a particularly bad matchup for him, unless I'm just way off on how this game is going to go.
I mean, that's really the outcome that you'd be looking at, is that Vegas is running away with this, and then all of a sudden it's a lot for Jacobs. We already know the concern. That was the fun. Remember, maybe it's week 1. Maybe he's the new Sammy Watkins, though, Pat. Maybe week 1 is when he gets all of his receiving in, and then he's nothing for the rest of the season, because that was the excitement last year with Josh Jacobs. But Kenyon Drake is a factor, and it's going to be a factor for his touches no matter what. I mean, he could even steal more carries than even got taken away from Jacobs last year. So that's a concerning threat. I don't have much of a problem with that. I'd probably lean, if it's my team, I still feel better than Jacobs than Chase Edmonds' share. I think that James Conner, while healthy, is a bigger factor for some people than, for me, in my opinion, it is. I think that Jacobs' share is going to be more than Myles Gaskin's is. Throwing a lot of S's in there. I would start him over Ronald Jones, not trusting that Buccaneers backfield. So, that being said, while we're recording this today, Giovanni Bernard has the injury question. So if Bernard is out, I feel better about Ronald Jones. Not that I think Ronald Jones will be used in the passing game, but it's one less option in that backfield. I want nothing on a week-to-week basis, if possible, to do with that Buccaneers backfield. Those are like nitpicky ones. The ones I feel better about than where you have them, specifically, especially because DeAndre Swift going against San Francisco and not being 100%. But also, I like Javonte Williams. I think he's already won that backfield. I think the fact that they didn't play him in the final game and they wanted to see Melvin Gordon with the first team tells us what we need to know.
That's where I think we might differ a little bit, because we hadn't seen Melvin Gordon because he was dealing with that injury the whole time.
Right.
Is it one of these cases where Williams is so entrenched as the starter, we don't need to see him anymore? Or is it we need to get Melvin Gordon some reps here because he hasn't played in like a real game in over a year, basically. Let's see what he does with the ones as well. I just think that, while I'm in on Williams, obviously I have him ranked at number 23 over Melvin Gordon. I do think that it's probably a bit more of a split than we're looking back. And Swift's health week 1 legit scares me. And I think he's too good to put weight too far down this list, because if he's playing, I'm probably playing him. But if he's not playing, like, how far up would we move Jamal Williams if Swift was just out week 1 with this groin?
I think you'd put Jamal Williams all the way up by Damien Harris. Jamal Williams has proven to be a top 15 running back, and we know the workload. Now, I'm not putting him in front of Harris and Edwards-Helaire and Mike Davis because I still think he has a limited ceiling, and the ceiling on the Lions is not the ceiling he had with the Packers. But that workload should be like, 80%? Because he's not going to fall out of the passing game. That's part of my concern for Swift this year, period, and why I have so much Jamal Williams is that a lot of the pushback I got was that, DeAndre Swift is such a good passer. I love DeAndre Swift, the talent. I don't know how many times I have to tell people this, but people forget that Jamal Williams is a good pass catcher. He's not on Swift's level, but he's good. He's better than most, and he's a really good pass blocker. And that doesn't tell me that Swift is guaranteed to get all of the passing down work. And that was my concern about Swift. So that's where I say Jamal Williams would probably be on the field like 80% of the time if there is no DeAndre Swift.
Jake, let me pull up my best guy who comments on the internet voice. Jake, why do you still hate DeAndre Swift so much?
You got me mid hydrating my my vocal cords over here. I love the why do you hate so much, because I prefaced it when my breakout running backs this year, like DeAndre Swift wasn't my number 1 breakout running back. Unfortunately, my number 1 was J.K. Dobbins. So much for that. Actually, 2 of my 5 were J.K. Dobbins and Cam Akers. Good God. Although Cam Akers kind of already broke out last year, and I even said that in the piece. But the very first sentence I said, Pat, was like, let me say this before we even start, and I put in a separate line altogether. I love DeAndre Swift, the talent. But anyway, what I'm getting at here is I'm pushing Josh Jacobs all the way up ahead of DeAndre Swift. I'd still put him right there with Javonte Williams. To go back to what you were saying, I think it's both. It's like, one is they've seen enough from Williams. They wanted to see Melvin Gordon, where I think that cements Williams as the lead, although I'm with you. I think it could be like a 60-40 split. It's not a very pronounced split. But if they really weren't set on Williams already, he would have got touches in that game as well. Like they wouldn't have just left them out altogether.
Oh, I agree. I think that he is the 1A, but I think this is a 1A, 1B situation, not he's the 1, Gordon's the 2. So
Yes.
that becomes tricky when we start evaluating upside. And the reason that I have Jacobs down is, one, this is about one of the worst matchups, I feel, at least. What do we know about week 1 and what defenses are going to be like? At least historically, good run defense on the Ravens, and they should be able to put up points pretty early, at least in my assessment, which means they're going to be playing from behind in fewer running situations. And versus the guys who are above him, and you mentioned Chase Edmonds a little bit earlier. So Edmonds, Hunt, Gaskin, Jones, I can see them with a lead and him just getting the ball a ton. And even Henderson, because I still think it's Henderson over Michelle. And it's a maybe with Ronald Jones, but I like that situation at a high game total, is if Vegas gets behind, Jacobs ain't scoring any fantasy points. Like his floor is,
That's
like
true.
you talk about Barkley's floor, his floor seems like it's like 2 points.
And that's certainly fair, but to being behind is actually the other person I was going to mention was I would have Darrell Henderson higher as well, mostly because if they're behind or if they're in front, Darrell Henderson is the guy. Similar,
But
I'll
Jake,
steal
I'm a coward, and Sony Michel scares me.
and say, you know what? He's not going to scare me. I'm stealing from Emery Hunt, our friend. He calls it smooth brain thinking. You're not using the ridges as where all your brain thoughts and the synapses are and everything like that. It's smooth brain thinking. The answer's in front of us. We sat there for months saying Darrell Henderson's one of the best backups. Don't forget how good he is if healthy, blah, blah, blah. And then what happens? Cam Akers gets hurt, and all of a sudden people are like, well, I don't know if it's Darrell Henderson. Who's behind him? Oh, that Xavier Jones guy who lost his job to Funk, then got hurt, then got put on the IR, and then they trade for Sony Michel. And nobody wanted Sony Michel, but now they want him because he's on the Rams. Like now he's the answer. Look, maybe he doesn't get goal line carries, but that's why Darrell Henderson's an RB2 and not an RB1. You know who Darrell Henderson is? While healthy. I don't discount the fact that he's had a lot of injuries already. But he's Matt Forte. Not every running back has to get all the goal line carries. Matt Forte was an RB1 for years, scoring 3, 4, 5 touchdowns throughout the entire year because he did all his work between the 20s. But you know what? I don't care in fantasy if you're an RB2. You can do that for me.
And sometimes all it takes is, I mean, we're building in a floor when the guys are touching the ball between the 20s. It's the same argument that people have against Eckler. All you need in the course of a season is a bit of touchdown luck on your side from one of those guys. Then all of a sudden they are absolute game changers for a season. Now it can go the other way, and they don't break through any of these touchdowns. They score like 3 throughout the course of the year. But remember that I vividly remember those 2 Forte years almost juxtaposed against each other. One year he was really down in touchdowns, and the next year he way over exceeded what he should have scored. And he was like the best running back in fantasy.
You're 100% right. Speaking of Austin Eckler, if they give him the Alvin Kamara just 30 to 40 carry boost, he's finishing as a top 5 running back. No question.
I think it does depend on the goal line work for him, but he's going to have one of the safest floors of any player because there's no game situation where he really gets taken out score-wise. Like they're down by 17, he's probably on the field all the time. They're up by 17, he's probably on at least for the first 2 downs or depending on where they are on the field.
Can I ask you, I know you do a completely separate show and it's not even with me, but are you with me in feeling like Javonte Williams is the chalk to fade? Like, because everybody's going to be in on him and then we don't know that split and at 4,000 it's just, I'm going elsewhere?
I think it really depends. I think it's, and this is for, I've ran through a couple of the week 1 numbers and how this all shakes itself out. But I think week 1 is a great week to pay up for the safe running backs because you can take all of your chances with cheap quarterbacks and cheap receivers who were just massively underpriced from a month ago. Like we're going to get to the tight end rankings and like, I don't like Tyler Kroft, but he's going to be on the field for the Jets all the time. And he's the minimum price.
Right.
Like throw him in, you can afford McCaffrey. And then I don't have to worry about Javonte Williams.
Yeah, it was the same page. I was just curious, throwing it out for a little nugget for people.
Yeah,
Sneak preview for your show.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's going to come out on Thursday. I don't even know who the guest is yet. We'll have to. It's going to be a surprise guest, but you can expect the DraftKings show every Thursday on Mayo Media Network. Spread picks on Wednesday. This show on Tuesdays. Once week 1 is over, we wanted to get out ahead of the game on this one. So very quickly, 31 through 40 at the running backs. Once again, you can find all of the rankings in the description. I have Trey Sermon at number 31, Tevin Coleman, Melvin Gordon, Jamal Williams, Phillip Lindsay, J.D. McKissick, A.J. Dillon, or Dylan, as others say his name, James Conner, David Johnson, and then James White at number 40. I don't have a good feeling on really any of these guys. Basically, I put Lindsay at 35 because that would just be my gamble that he plays the most snaps. He could be the worst guy in that backfield, but that's the chance that I would take. I think McKissick's going to get, because the pass rush for the Chargers theoretically is really good, I can see McKissick getting a lot of dump offs in that game. Although, as you've stated before, Ryan Fitzpatrick isn't really the check down king. I do think that there would be set plays for both him, and if Curtis Samuel is firing at 100%, I think that hurts McKissick a little bit, but I can see them throwing a bunch in that game as well. But you know how I love me some JD McKissick, and maybe by week 2 he's ranked like 99th at running back. But that's where I'm going here, because I don't have a ton of confidence in a lot of these guys once you get down to that level. Maybe Dylan should be up above Lindsey and McKissick, but we are really picking nits. And the good thing is you probably don't have to play any of these guys because it's week 1.
Yeah, that's true. So 2 things from this list I'll say is, one is, no, he's not the worst one in the backfield, because worst place is the worst one in that backfield. It's Mark Ingram. So watch Mark Ingram be the best running back, which still means nothing, because the best running back still might rank out as 30th in the week. And that might just be good, good job getting your 6.2 points because you fell into the end zone or something like that. But I want nothing to do with that backfield. I want to come back to one because we kind of skipped over Edmonds. So here's my hesitancy. And it's not just the split with James Conner. It's also the game script in this game. Who they're facing? They're facing the Titans, which inherently are one of the least amount of plays run for opponents as well, which kind of pushes me towards, unless the Titans are blowing them out, which I don't think is going to happen, I just don't see that Chase Edmonds is going to get a high volume in this specific game. Like, I could see my Conner and Edmonds rankings kind of flipping week to week depending on the matchup. Like I pass happier, higher scoring. I want Edmonds in a game like this. I don't really want either, but this kind of feels more like a James Conner game.
So I thought initially the same thing, and then I started to think about how this game is going to go. Both defenses, Arizona's defense is good at getting to the quarterback. They're not a good defense, especially in the passing game. The Titans' defense is basically a sieve, but they play in a division where that just doesn't really matter. This is the highest total game in week 1. 52.5 is the over-under. No game is maybe the opener.
I think that's efficiency, though, for the Titans. I don't think
actually,
that's really...
there's one more that's higher. It's the Browns and Chiefs. That's 53. It's efficiency for the Titans, but if Arizona is going to have to put up a ton of points in this game, and the implication would be like they're 3-point dogs, so they are going to score 20-plus points in this spot. It feels like it's going to be a lot of Kyler running, a lot of Kyler throwing deep, and just a lot of Kyler throwing in general. And if it's a Kyler throwing script, I feel like that's more Edmonds than Connor's.
Okay. Again, this is why I said that at the beginning of the show. You bring up valid points and you have me rethink it sometimes. I think it really just comes down to, I don't want to start either one of them.
Fair. Listen, that there's a reason that they're at 28 and whatever they are. I think if you're playing the touchdown game, it's probably Connor. But if you're playing that between the 20s game and the floor, and that's where I'm at with these running backs in this part of the rankings, I think it's floor.
I was actually going to say, like, Edmonds, I think might even have a higher ceiling unless Connor falls in twice for 2 touchdowns. Because if this has to be a 30-point game, and then Edmonds comes out of this game with kind of like a Mike Davis, 12, not even 12 carries, like 10 carries, but 7 receptions, that could happen.
Absolutely. And I don't want to have to bank on Connor 2 touchdowns. And again, this is more of a floor idea rather than a ceiling idea. I do agree with you that it just takes one juke from Edmonds and he could be gone. I don't feel like Connor has that ability anymore. His touchdowns are going to come from like the 3-yard line.
Yeah, he used to have that. I would love to see him get it back, but yeah, the good thing is, like you said, week 1, you probably have no reason to play most of these guys unless you had a Dobbins injury and you went wide receiver heavy early, and that might be it. But outside of that, I don't see many people getting past the top 30 anyway.
The draft recap I put up for your Flex League, I drafted that team. Looking better by Gus Edwards, Damian Harris, Mostert. Here we go. I just went tight ends and receivers heavy and drafted all those goons.
Well, you also, to be honest with it, I'm not taking anything away from your team, but honestly, the Edwards thing is just, you fell into an amazing situation.
But what was the point of drafting him? And what I continuously brought up in those running back rankings that we did is I had him ranked higher than everyone else in case a situation like this happened, where I thought he had a decent floor anyway because he was still going to get touches, not someone you wanted to play but could play that was on your team. And if anything ever happened to Dobbins, all of a sudden you have a legit running back starter, and that's why I drafted him, why I drafted Mostert, why I drafted Damian Harris.
I was going to say it was the smart pick. Super smart pick.
I drafted Latavius Murray for the same thing too, but it doesn't even look like he's second in line anymore. So that's a bad pick. But that was the reasoning behind passing on running backs early and just piling up a whole bunch of those guys.
Right. And so I think that's really what comes down. Like, I was going to say, even if you didn't hit with the Edwards situation yet with Dobbins staying healthy, he was still a serviceable option. But more importantly, that's where I was going to go, is that the Damian Harris, I think, was the smarter pick for your team construction, though I'm not taking anything away from Edwards. Like, it's just slightly smarter because Harris was the outlier of value at the time we drafted and continued to be, seeing how that situation is going to play out. But you benefited. Like, this isn't going to happen. I mean, if Dobbins stays healthy the entire year, at best you got a flex play out of Gus Edwards. But again, this is, the upside. The upside. What do you say all the time, Pat? You want to finish in first place. You don't want to finish in third, fourth, fifth, or sixth, or whatever. So you go with this route. You hit on one of these running backs because of an injury, and all of a sudden you have a first place team.
Yeah, and it's different. Like the backups that you could potentially draft. Like, I'm never one to like handcuff my guy. I'm more of a handcuff of other people's guys that I want to target the running backs who, if the starter goes down, they're all of a sudden the guy. And I was wrong about that with Murray, I think, at least. And maybe it turns out to be right. If something happens to Kamara, it's not looking that way at the moment based on what we saw. Although he did make the team, that has to be a positive. But it's not like, oh, I'm going to draft Carlos Hyde. It's like, who cares about Carlos Hyde? His role is going to remain unchanged. He's just going to be a pest to James Robinson or whoever the starter is in Jacksonville.
You didn't draft David Johnson in case Philip Lindsay gets hurt?
No, exactly. See, like, that's such a and I mean, that, but it's such a low upside proposition that, at least if I'm going to take these guys, the gamble better be good that it is a high upside proposition that I can cash in if the unknown happens. Like, you can't prepare for the unknown, but you can put yourself into a position to get lucky with the unknown. And I feel like that's actually a part of my draft strategy.
And this is the blueprint of how it can work. So kudos.
Enjoy
your stretch run to start the season.
Now, I mean, I'm taking my victory lap before the season. Watch me come in dead last.
I think as I was saying, enjoy the beginning of the season and see how it works.
Hey, listen, the beginning of the season is when all of this is glorious. We're all right. No one is wrong yet. And then the harsh reality sets in. Let's move to...
Hey, I'm rooting for you. You've won a title before, right? You have one in your bank, don't you?
Oh, yeah. I got the belt. I don't have it on the set, but I got the belt. So I have a first, a third, a second, and then I missed the playoffs on points last year because I think I had the third most points in it, but only the most, like the team that scores the most points and doesn't make
sixth place.
Gets sixth place. But Eric Young actually missed the playoffs too and had more points than me somehow. So he got the wild card spot and I didn't. I was like, damn it. I was going to do well in the playoffs here.
Oh no, I got one better for you. As I was hitting that stretch run during the back half of the season, and I was set for sixth place points because I had such an unlucky first start. And Jen Ryan of Football Diehards was the fifth seed, but she lost, which gave her she unexpectedly lost. Her team just fell apart right before the playoffs, and then tied with me in record, but she had just barely more points than I did, so she kicked me out even though I was already set to be in.
I see. That's the one thing about the wild card rule, which everyone should play with in their fantasy league, by the way. It's awesome. Wide receivers. I don't want to belabor the top 10 too much. I'll give you the top 20, and you can see if anyone's an outlier because I feel like these are people everyone should be starting. Number 1, Devontae Adams, Calvin Ridley, Tyreek Hill, Hopkins, Diggs, Jefferson, DK Metcalf, Scorin, McLaurin, A.J. Brown, Keenan Allen into Chris Godwin, Allen Robinson, CeeDee Lamb, Adam Thielen, Tyler Lockett, Deontay Johnson, Cooper Kupp, Mike Evans, Amari Cooper, DJ Moore. I can't envision sitting any of those guys. There's even a few more. Like, I will even throw in Robert Woods and Julio Jones, who are the next two on the list. I probably wouldn't sit those guys either.
I was going to say, I mean, you said you don't want to belabor the top 10. I don't even know how you can really get much into the top 20 period. Like, yeah, it's just, I'm looking at this list and like, so somebody's gonna be like, oh, you have CeeDee Lamb too low. Like, who cares? Like, what, you want to switch Keenan Allen and CeeDee Lamb? I mean, who cares? This is, if you drafted anybody in this list, you're starting them 100%.
Especially,
our conversation shouldn't even start until the 22s.
Yeah, especially in week 1, you're starting these guys.
I mean, most of them were first 3-4th rounders anyway. So, like, why do you? Again, I wouldn't even be benching them in most matchups throughout the season.
Yeah, I mean, circumstances can change. Like, maybe Julio sucks in Tennessee, and then you're not starting him anymore.
Right.
It's possible.
But, I mean, like, are you sitting Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods because they're, facing Tre'Davious White this week or something like that. No, you were starting them anyway.
Exactly. So I think the more important discussion we have is who are you starting at wide receiver 3, or if you went running back and tight end heavy and you don't have great receivers. I think that's the better discussion that we can have to actually help people. So the entire 21 through 30, like I mentioned, Robert Woods, Julio Jones, my guy, Deebo Samuel, who I do enjoy more than Brandon Ayuk, but he's still up here as well. So Deebo, Cooks, Robbie Anderson, Corey Davis, T. Higgins, Marv Jones, Harry. Love me some Marv Jones. It turns out his shoulder's going to be okay. It seems, at least. Jamar Chase, Brandon Ayuk, Cortland Sutton, Marquez Callaway, Devonta Smith, Jerry Jeudy. That's probably, I feel like, the next tier of guys. I know people are going to argue with me about Jamar Chase, but it took a lot of restraint for me not to rank him higher, although the preseason scared the absolute shit out of me. I'm still going to play him week 1 if I drafted him, which I'm going to be doing. I think there is a line of demarcation between Jeudy and Pittman, between who's like a good wide receiver 3 and then who we're rolling the dice on a little bit here. I think there are safe guys in that 30 to 31, but there's also potential high upside guys as well. Like, I have Michael Pittman at number 34. I think he could be really good. I could be way wrong on that.
See, I was going to draw my line a little bit higher than you. So 2 things is, well, and I'll give you my line. Ayuk and Sutton, I would start over Chase. And I've been a Chase apologist this entire time and say don't overrate the drops. But I will say don't underrate that he's in his own head at this point. Especially because that one series, it's not just that they threw the ball to him and he dropped it. Forget that. Like, just forget. It's the fact that they were one series and said, let's just try to get Jamar Chase the ball and get him out of his own head. Like, that was what that play was intended to do. And he dropped it. And then that was it. That was all the opportunity he got. I still think Chase is great. I still think Chase is top 20 upside, but it might take a few weeks, especially he's on a team where they don't need him to be an answer or even be an option right now, and they can go to Higgins and Tyler Boyd until Chase is comfortable. So I would put him behind Ayuk and Sutton because I saw everything I need to see from Sutton. He was cutting without any problems, without any hesitancies, without any hiccup in his step. So I would go with Ayuk and Sutton, and then Chase starts that next group, and that's where my line starts. My line actually starts with Chase, Callaway, Smith, Jeudy, Pittman, and the rest, because I like a lot of those guys, but I think that's where you start getting into, you can honestly have a debate with some of them. Like Jeudy in that game, I'm not trying to read too much into it, but he was on the field playing the slot. Patrick was playing in 2 wide. Jeudy wasn't always in 2 wide. I don't know if that was just a thing to get Sutton his reps and not tinker too much, and they already saw enough from Jeudy as well. But that just maybe kind of raised my eyebrow just a smidge. Antonio Brown, we saw in December, it could arguably be like the number 2 some games, and then again down from there. But that my cutoff would be Sutton and then Chase down from there.
All right, I will bump Chase down. I think you've effectively sold me on the in your own head narrative. You know that I'm still going to be playing him. Like, I have him everywhere, so I always have to play him based on where I've taken him. Although I went, like I said, a very tight end wide receiver heavy at the beginning of my drafts and had these like mediocre middling running backs. So maybe I can get away with not playing him in every single situation, but I'll bump him down to number 30 behind Cortland Sutton, then go Chase Callaway. I think Devonta Smith could be awesome in week 1 because I'm not buying this Falcons defense at all. And the reason, if people are wondering why I have Chase Claypool down at number 36, is I think that's the Tre'Davious White assignment against the Bills. It's going to be hard to do it to Deontay Johnson. He's more of a possession guy. Maybe that is where he gets locked down. It's probably not going to be Juju out of the slot. It just seems logically in my mind that they have Tre'Davious White shadow anyone. It's going to be Chase Claypool, the big hitter where they're going to go get their points.
Well, I'll even add to that. I'll say it might not be Tre'Davious White on Claypool all the time because Claypool might not be on the field all the time.
Yeah.
Well, and here's the thing: is it's twofold. Is one, there's talk about this offense not being as 3 wide as it was. Part of that is Najee Harris, but also that's just part of, like, they said they were changing this offense a little too reliant on the 3 wide. They were one of the top 5 teams last year. Actually, I think they were number 2 or number 3 in 3 wide, and they had been trending up 3 straight years. And there's already been a lot of talk about getting back away from that. And to couple into that conversation is when it was only 2 wide, Claypool wasn't on the field. And Claypool not only wasn't on the field, but in game 3, when there was no Deontay, no Juju, because it was like, we're not really doing the starters, Claypool was out there a ton. I'm not saying that to read too much into like whatever is, maybe they just didn't want to play much of Ray McLeod and James Washington. but it still tells me definitively that he's 3 behind Deontay Johnson and Juju Smith-Schuster. So again, I don't think we know, as you said, Tre'Davious White definitively who he's going to lock up, and he might just kind of, depending on the formation. I know he does shadow more than some corners, but he might just mix and match depending on what the formation is because all 3 of them are good. But it's more so the opportunity to be on the field. I think Claypool is going to be the odd man out more often than not. And you know what he's the best in, Pat? He is the best ball wide receiver you could find.
That's true. Unfortunately, this is start them or sit them, so you might have to, if you have better options, you can send him. But if you want that upside, I do think that he possesses a ton because obviously the touchdown rate per target last year was just so elevated. But I think that is going to be a part of his game in his career just because he can make so many deep athletic plays that sometimes he's just uncoverable no matter how good a quarter is.
Oh, definitely. And I think if you're looking for kind of the conversation we were having at running back, you could argue that Boyd and Juju behind him have the better floors.
Sure. But that is exactly the reason why I still have Claypool ahead of him. And maybe I just have the Higgins, Chase, and Boyd situation just all jumbled up and I'm wrong. But someone has to be the guy who's a little bit behind. Like I picked Antonio Brown for the Bucks. I picked Tyler Boyd for the Bengals. Like they're just lower. I still think that
Gallup for Dallas.
Michael Gallup for Dallas. And in any given day, those could be the highest scoring receivers on the team. But if I'm thinking about it from a macro approach where I'm looking all season long, how am I going to do my rankings? And obviously new information is going to change things. However, I think that Boyd's going to be the 3rd highest scoring receiver on the Bengals. I think that Brown's going to be 3rd. I think that Gallup's going to be 3rd when we look back at it throughout the course of the year. So it's hard to like pick a matchup where, oh no, this is the week where it's Boyd and it's not T. Higgins. Like, no, you kind of have to go with what you think is going to happen in the year.
You didn't do T. Higgins right.
T.
There you go. You know what? I want to get into one wide receiver you haven't talked about yet. So do you want to hit your next list? Because the wide receivers kind of overlap in the conversation I want to have.
Well, the rest of the top 30, so it's Pittman, Brown, Claypool, Hollywood Brown, DJ Chark, and Tyler Boyd and Jarvis Landry. I only put Hollywood Brown this highly because it's him and like Devin Duvernay as the and I think Hollywood Brown's playing. I don't even know that for sure yet.
Hey, if there's no Hollywood Brown, I'm going to have a lot of Devin Duvernay in that one-off game.
I think you could have a lot of Devin Duvernay anyway in that game as a DraftKings like single slate thing.
You know what?
You know what's actually pretty cool that you can do? And I mean, I know you've been on the site too. At runthesims.com, we have the single game showdown and the single game simulator. So even if someone's scratched last second or they're not playing, you can go put their like target share to 0. But like, frankly, if Duvernay is either the wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2 by the time this game actually comes around, and you think it's going to be a higher paced, high scoring game, you can go run that game 10,000 times and see like what the baseline chart for him is. I bet you that he is going to be one of the optimal players that you can play in that game based on upside. Obviously, he's Devin Duvernay, and his floor is pretty low, but I could see where he has a huge spike because of this matchup.
Yeah, what I was going to say might be intriguing is that he's probably the better ownership play if Marquise Brown is playing because everybody is going to be on if he's not. So then I think that might actually be the better way to go for that one. Your next list, you want to do the next list because I want to talk DJ Chark, but I want to bring him into a conversation with somebody. I'll just say it on the Giants.
All right. So it's DJ Chark, Tyler Boyd, Jarvis Landry, Laviska Shenault, Juju Smith-Schuster, Odell Beckham, Michael Gallup, Jacoby Myers, Sterling Shepard, Curtis Samuel, Kenny Golladay, Jalen Waddle, and Devontae Parker. I don't know what to do with these Dolphins guys, but I just have them. Start them if you desperately have to. I have no confidence in either of them. So you want to talk about Golladay?
Yeah, Golladay and Shark. Oh, by the way, apparently, if you look at his pronunciation, it's supposed to be shark, like the animal. So, like whether we want to go with that or not, I know how you are with pronunciations, but it's supposed to be DJ Shark. Anyway, Shark and Golladay. What was going to be my question to you is like, do you even want? I know you have Shark rated higher and kind of he's in the startable range, but if it's me, I'm looking for any opportunity to not play either one of them, even if the reports are they're practicing in full, just because we haven't seen them at all this preseason. Both of them are playing with quarterbacks that they've never played with before. Both of them have other options on their teams who are showing plenty of rapport and plentiful options on their team with the quarterback. And it's just like, what is Galladay? I'm legitimately more concerned about Galladay than I am Shark, but I don't really want to start either one of them if I can avoid it. Like I would go Waddle over both of them, as crazy as that might sound.
You would go who?
Jalen Waddle.
Oh, you go Waddle over them? Over both of them? I mean, you can convince me on
I
anything
like
with
how-
these. I really don't want to play Galladay. Chark, I was kind of wishy-washy on just because I like him. But for week one, maybe you're right. Like, would you go Cole Beasley, the Bees, or would you go Shark?
I know everybody hates Beasley because
You know what?
Right
Listen. You can hate Cole Beasley as much as you want. This is fucking fantasy football. You should start who you think is better on your team. Swear to God.
No, and that was going to be my point. Cole Beasley has done nothing, but he's been your guy for the longest time. Pat deserves all the credit in the world. He had never given up. He was always the biggest fan of Cole Beasley in fantasy, and all he's done is produce for you, Pat. And all he is going to continue to do is produce as the number 2 wide receiver for Josh Allen, whether it's not Emmanuel Sanders or Gabriel Davis is the number 3. Cole Beasley is Cole Beasley is Cole Beasley. I would go Cole Beasley over both of them just on a confidence level.
Would you go with Jamison Crowdell?
That's where I probably am the breaker point because Crowder's also dealing with that hamstring or whatever he's got going on, and who ever knows if he's ever 100% any given game. I will make a case for one guy even behind all of these that we haven't even gotten to yet that I would start over, maybe not Shark, but I would probably start over Galladay.
All right, well, hit me with it. I moved Shark down to 50 and Galladay to 51. You've properly convinced me I'd start the Dolphins guys over that. I think you made a very good case for them and the Bees. I have the Bees ahead of them as well, so they're just behind him. But who is the... If you say Henry Ruggs, you might have to throw in the towel on him at some point.
No, I do think Henry Ruggs is in a nice situation this year, but not week one.
But week one, week one's kind of tough for old Ruggs.
Yeah. Despite the matchup, Darnell Mooney, even with Andy Dalton, I would have higher. I would definitely start him in front of Jamison Crowder, no question about it.
Oh, no. If Crowder is healthy, it's going to be Boku catches for him.
Yeah, I'm going Darnell Mooney. But the one I'm going to go back up there from there is he's healthy right now, and that's all that matters. The Gazelle is healthy. And you want to talk about 25% of the target share because TJ Hawkinson can only cap out at so much before the rest is going to Tyrell Williams. And then whatever's going on in that backfield. And sure, St. Brown wasn't even running with the ones. He was on the 3rd team until recently, until they made some of their cuts. Quintus Cephas was in front of him. Even so, St. Brown is a slot option. He's healthy right now. It might only last 1 week before he pulls another soft tissue injury. But Tyrell Williams, I would start... I'm telling you, it's a toss-up for me with Galladay. Galladay against Denver, not playing at all with how terrible Daniel Jones has looked and how terrible that offensive line still looks. I'm just, screw it. If it's my lineup, I'm starting Tyrell Williams over Kenny Galladay.
I'm not, and here's why. And why I have St. Brown above Tyrell Williams by 1 spot, even if he's not in on every series or every formation, is I really respect this fully healthy Niners defense. And it might be a target share issue, but I think that the easiest completions on the field for Jared Goff the offensive line for the Lions is actually quite good, but I just think that pocket is going to be crumbling with the heat that they're going to bring and how solid they are on the outside at corner. That the middle of the field is where the majority of these completions are going to be made, and that leads me towards St. Brown. That leads me towards Hawkinson or Williams and Swift out of the backfield. I think it's going to be tough treading for Cephas and Tyrell Williams in this specific matchup.
Yeah, I think that you could throw me on the defensive line, and that Giants offensive line's crumbling. We've already seen it. They made 2 trades and a pickup during this cut waiver situation. 2 trades for late round picks for guys that were probably going to get cut. Another person who did get cut to bring in because their offensive line and their offensive line depth is trash. I keep saying for running backs, I don't care. Volume is what matters. James Robinson and David Montgomery on terrible offensive lines last year, and they both finished top 10. Those are running backs. It's not Daniel Jones at quarterback, and it's not Daniel Jones being your reliance for weapons to get. You want to talk about somebody who's not going to see very many targets if the line is collapsing? I don't know how Kenny Galladay gets anything thrown his way, even if he's on the field.
Yeah, that's why I have Sterling Shepard above him. Sterling Shepard, just lock him into 8 targets a game. That's what he does when he's healthy.
Right, but I was making the case of Tyrell over Kenny Galladay.
Yeah, hopefully you don't have to play any of these jabronis, and you'll be good.
Hopefully. That's the thing. It's like, hopefully you're not digging this deep.
Yeah, especially in week 1 when there's no bye weeks.
No, there's not. Like, I don't even know who else you would go down this list. You know, again, Brian Edwards and Henry Ruggs are intriguing, especially with the reports of like they were looking so good. That's what happened to John Brown, is he wanted out of there because he knew he wasn't the starter. But again, it's Baltimore. Like, do you really want to roll them out there? Elijah Moore has been banged up and not healthy. Nico Collins sounds fun, but
who knows?
Was it Tyrod Taylor? They still haven't even announced our quarterback.
We're just assuming it's Taylor, right?
I mean, we are, but Taylor himself has come out and said he doesn't even know if he's the starter.
Well, he probably has to dodge a needle to the lung before week 1, and then maybe he can get on the field.
He just doesn't want to go to the doctor's room. That's what it is.
All right, let's roll through the rest of the positions. We'll go to tight end right now. I think that there's 5 very solid guys, 4 per like that you're starting, and then it becomes a crapshoot of who you want to go to. So I go Kelsey, Kittle, Waller, Andrews, Pitts. You're starting those 5 100%. Higbee, Logan Thomas, TJ Hawkinson, because I am scared of that San Francisco defense. I just think they thrash the Lions. Maybe I'm wrong. And Robert Tonyan. I think that those guys are all guys that are going to start on your fantasy team as well. Then it's Gesicki, Goddard, Jonnu. I have Tyler Kroft up here at number 13 against Carolina because he's the only tight end on the Jets at the moment. Evan Ingram, who's banged up with his calf injury. Gronk in the opening game. Like, it's touchdown or bust for almost all of these guys as we go down the list. Ferkser, Hooper, Everett, Komet, Henry, Secret of the Uzma, Hayden Hurst. And you'll probably see a lot of 12 sets from the Atlanta Falcons as well. So Hurst is still going to be on the field. There's going to be games this year where he outscores Kyle Pitts. I'm convinced of it. So just because he's going to be out there, and you know who's going to get the attention? It's not going to be Hayden Hurst.
No, it's not. So there's 2 cases I'll make here. It's not a big mover, but I would play Jonnu over Goddard and Gesicki. I've mentioned this a lot, that Gesicki saw one of the highest usage for slot tight ends running out of the slot, which is Jalen Waddle. So he's not going to be there. And he also saw one of the biggest market shares of all tight ends and still barely checked inside the top 10. I just think Gesicki's going to lose a lot from Waddle being on this team. And
hold on.
You could say
yes, but in week 1, and what I'm going to say,
I was just about to get to that.
I'm going to take the words out of your mouth. Will Fuller is not playing, so there is a chance that it's not going to be 100% Waddle in the slot. They might bump him outside in certain series,
right.
Play Gesicki in the slot. So I think that week 1 in particular is a nice spot for him.
Okay, and that's what I was going to say. So I could see maybe that, but I would play Jonnu over both of them. I think Jonnu could be the number 1, whether it's Jacoby Myers or him or Nelson Aguilar. I think Jonnu is one of the top 3, if not top 2 options.
What is Henry's?
So I'm going with
what is Henry's like official status entering week 1?
Still questionable.
All right, so if he's not,
it's the Patriots.
It's true. If he's out, Jonnu's going up, but I still think that he's going to play and play a lot.
Well, and this could be completely wrong, and I think a lot of people, I don't think this is not the common assumption. And the common assumption is that Jonnu is the more valuable fantasy asset than Hunter Henry because he should run more routes. But I wouldn't be shocked if that doesn't come to fruition because Jonnu's a better blocker than people realize. That he's actually very close to Hunter Henry and how good of a blocker he is. But he's also just a step behind, but he's also a step ahead and matchup problems with gaining separation and the matchups with, so maybe the combination of the 2 really gives him that leg up, and that's what we're all kind of assuming, but I want to assume to say I can't be wrong on that. The other one I'm going to say here is, you said it's touchdown or bust. I look back at Gronk last year, and I look back at Gronk once he, I referenced this to you, and I wasn't doing it as a name drop to be like, oh, I had Brian McFadden on my show. But I did it because Brian McFadden's a former football player who knows a hell of a lot more than we do, as much as we know. And he said, he calls this, and I give him so much credit for this because he's a football player, and he knew. He said, don't expect Gronkowski for a few weeks. And when Antonio Brown signed, he said, don't expect to see Antonio Brown perform until December. He said until December. He called it. And so I say this for 2 reasons. From week 6, when Gronk kind of hit and kind of woke up, he was tight end 4 or 5, depending on your league. So let's go to December and only take December when Antonio Brown was involved and finally back to being Antonio Brown. Gronk was still tight end 9. So I know he's kind of touchdown or bust to a degree, but I think it's not as bust as people think it is. And I would play Gronk all the way up over Kroft, no question about it. And until Zach Ertz completely goes away, I kind of go with a toss-up of Goddard or Gronk. If you want to go Goddard, no problem. But that's actually where I would put the toss-up for Gronk.
Yeah, I'm going to call Croft the guy that you can pick up off the waiver wire right now if you've already drafted and play him week 1 if you have no tight end. I'm kind of locked into Croft. Maybe it's because his DraftKings price is so enticing, but it feels like it depends on what you want out of your tight end, too. Like, Gronk's far more likely to catch 2 touchdowns and score 20 points, but it feels like he's also more likely to score 2 points, where I feel like Croft in a half-point PPR is probably good for, like, 6.5 to 9.5 points, which sometimes is all I want.
And that's certainly fair, but at the tight end position, for the fact that 1 touchdown for 1 yard get you probably tight end 11 or 12 for the week, I'm just going to chase the touchdowns.
Okay. Quarterbacks. I got Lamar at number 1 for week 1. Mahomes at number 2. Kyler, Brady, Josh Allen, Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson, Dak Prescott, Jalen Hurts at number 9, and Ryan Tannehill at number 10. I had mentioned that high total game. I'll also run through the next 10 as well. Herbert, Ryan, Stafford, Burrow, Sam Donald, Trevor Lawrence, Kirk Cousins, Zach Wilson, Jameis, who is famous, I have heard, and Ben Roethlisberger would be my top 20. Is there anyone that isn't in that top 20 that you think should be? Like, I just don't see it with a lot of these guys. I feel like the floor is very low, or it's a tough matchup, or it's a high running team, and they don't have the necessary rushing floor to make up if the passing doesn't go their way.
So that should be in the top 20 or in the top 20 higher? Because there's two players, one on either side.
Okay, so should be in the top 20 that is not right now.
Tua. And there's not even a doubt in my mind. It's not that bad of a matchup, especially with, no Gilmore. But Tua as a whole, I've been on this Tua situation this entire offseason again, I don't know how many times I have to say this, so I'm repeating myself for a lot of people. So if you want to skip ahead a minute into Pat's show, but they straddled the fence and they tried to run a Fitzpatrick/Tua offense last year. He didn't have Parker healthy for most of the season. Parker actually bookended the years with hamstring injuries. No Preston Williams, not that I think he's a factor, but I go down the list to say his number 1 option was Gesicki, in an offense that really wasn't designed for him completely. Tua was also still not 100% by reports coming off that injury. You've seen him in the preseason. You see him with Waddle and Parker, and even without Will Fuller. To have Gesicki in this mix, to see Tua playing the way that Tua is playing, people forget how good he was. You don't take the 80-plus touchdowns and 10 or 11 interceptions in college and just throw away Tua because of his rookie year. Tua is always going to be inside my top 20 despite matchup until he bombs for multiple weeks, 2 or 3 weeks probably. But I don't think that's going to happen. I'm playing Tua. I'm playing Tua over Fitzpatrick, Garoppolo, Roethlisberger, Wilson. I'd put him right behind Cousins. And then the other player I was going to mention is I would have Winston over Cousins. But that's only 2 spots.
I just like that Cincinnati matchup for Kirk Cousins. It could be a big Dalvin Cook game, but it might be a nice spot to establish him. I feel like Cousins is always going to come in right around 17 or 18 because he has these low floor
that's what
games.
He does.
Yeah, but that's just who he is every single week. Like, he'll finish his quarterback 18. He'll have 4 or 5 like top 5 performances in a year because touchdowns break his way. So I always consider that in. Just Belichick versus Tua scares the shit out of me. That's really what it is. That he'll just, much like when I remember we had this discussion on the show last year that like Belichick is going to eat Justin Herbert's lunch, and he did. And I feel like he's going to do, and I feel like he's going to do the same thing to Tua here.
I think it's going to be different this year with Tua. Understand? If you don't want to play him, if you want to go, and I'm not saying narrative disrespectively because narratives are narratives because. Some of them are created, and that's why I will say, like, you create your own narrative, but this is a narrative of, like, there's a substantial evidence behind it. So maybe if you want to go with the history pointing to the Belichick stops inexperienced quarterbacks 90% of the time or whatever it is, I don't blame you. I'm just telling you from where I come from on the Tua standpoint and the Jameis Winston. Again, Jameis Winston, I'm going for a little bit more ceiling. He definitely has the lower floor with Callaway and Traquan Smith being his number 1 and number 2. I don't disagree with you there. So if you want to go Cousins, then Winston. I would just Zach Wilson just doesn't do it for me. And he's basically Daniel Jones with lesser rushing upside. So that's really what it comes down from a fantasy standpoint. How does he get to even top 15? And that's my question.
I think that he is going to run more than maybe you think that he's going to do. And for what, like, I know the game total, like one of my bets in week 1 is going to be Carolina, New York over. I just don't think that the Jets defense is very good at all. That Sam Darnold, and in the revenge narrative, you want to talk about narratives, and this offense is just going to put up a ton of points on this bad Jets defense. And he might end up with like 50 passing attempts, which I'm going to take that volume. And if he ends up with like 6, 7,
how many rushing yards do you have for Wilson this year? Or do you have that up? Are you able to pull that up?
I can pull it up very quickly. Go over to runthesims.com.
I'm curious.
I have my projections, which are still completely free. You can go actually use the projection builder and put in your own inputs if you want. I don't know if I've messed. I still think I have Tim's inputs in from this. I have him for an 11% market share of the rushes on this team. And that's something actually I want to talk about here in a second. So where does that put him for overall rushing yards? Zach Wilson, 212 rushing yards for the year on 47 attempts.
Yeah, so I have him for more rushing than you do for this year.
Well, I scaled that back after the Tim stuff because I had them at a passing rate that was so substantially high to get his passing numbers up just to see what that would look like. But I just think this game is going to be a shootout, and I want to have quarterbacks in shootouts.
All right, and yeah, look, certainly fair. Those are my only 2 differences, and they're not even that large. I'm not even crapping over having Sam Darnold where you have him, just because I do think the Jets defense is miserable.
Yeah, I think they're going to be the defense to pick on this year. And where those 2 game totals are really close, the Carolina and Jets and Miami and New England, like I would lean under in the Miami and New England game, where I would lean over in that other game. So that's really going to be a decider for me. I did move up to 21 behind Ben Roethlisberger, though. I put him ahead of Fitz and Garoppolo and Baker and Daniel Jones. I think you did sell me on that. But I am in on Tua this year. I don't like New England at all. Maybe prove me wrong, Tua. Actually, you can just do it for yourself, but I'll be waiting on the sidelines. I have Tua in some spots. We'll see how see what he's up to, if I can find a better option for week 1. Jets running. Hold on. Jets running back situation with the Jets. We totally just didn't talk about it.
Right.
How do you see it shaking down? Like if they're way behind, is Ty Johnson going to play a ton?
I don't know, say a ton. I think Michael Carter got sprinkled in more than people might assume after what we've seen recently. But the Michael Carter thing was what we have said this entire time, was that he'll be the lead at some point. But Tevin Coleman was going to be a thorn, if not the lead, to start. And admittedly, I wasn't expecting Ty Johnson to be the factor. I was expecting it more to be Tevin Coleman. But Carter was always the long play. So if you had late drafts, I actually enjoyed the fact that Carter came back in price and ADP. I didn't like I actually ended up with less Carter than I thought I was going to, because once he hit the 5th round, I was taking wide receivers and I wasn't taking Carter at that point. That being said, I wouldn't panic on Carter yet. I still think he's going to be the guy. It's just going to take a few weeks, 5th, 6th week of the season. This week 1, if they are behind, I still think you'll see enough Coleman. He's not going to completely come off the field, but yeah, Ty Johnson, I think, might be like a 50-50 split with Michael Carter. And that means just get the hell out of this situation for now. It's essentially the worst version of the Buccaneers, because their offense isn't as good as the Buccaneers offense.
True. I'd probably want the guy who's on the field the most when they're catching passes. Like when they're passing, that's the guy that.
And it might, to your point about that, it might be Ty Johnson to start the season.
Oh boy. Fun times had by all in the Jets backfield.
I was going to say real quick as a joke, but I'm serious. Your final 2 quarterbacks, I would put Dalton dead last. I would actually start Jared Goff before I started Andy Dalton this week.
Yeah, let's hope it never comes to that. I'll keep it as it is, because I don't feel like doing the legwork.
You might be in a super flex. I mean, you might be in a super flex, and you just you got stuck on a turn and watered down at running back, and all of a sudden you have nothing left.
I'll go with Dalton. Maybe he'll just, at least he can just chuck it up to Allen Robinson. Allen Robinson can do stuff. Or your boy Mooney Tunes.
Andy Dalton's gonna. I'm getting that shirt. Do you want one?
Sure.
Do you want one? Do you want? Yeah, I'm finding somebody to help me make one, because I couldn't get RotoWare, because the NFL is so. They'll actually, honestly, if I make like 2, they might come after me too.
No, there you go. So yeah, you keep one for yourself. You wear it on the show. It's my inspiration for Mooney Tunes. Badoo, badoo, badoo. That's all, folks. And then boom. Just touchdowns. Maybe that can be his catchphrase. Who knows? Defenses. Before we get out of here, I go Rams, number 1. 49ers, number 2. Ravens, Broncos, Chargers, Bills, Patriots, Steelers. I like the Panthers against the Jets, too, in what could be a very sloppy shootout type of game. And I think that the Panthers actually generate a pretty good pass rush. So I think that's the sneaky, streamable defense that you can play this week and use on DraftKings. Even though I think that there's a lot of points in that game, those two things aren't necessarily mutually exclusive. The defense can score, too. Washington, Packers, Dolphins, Chiefs, Bucks, Colts, Seahawks, Jags, and Falcons. Those are the 18 defenses that I ranked this week.
Yeah, I think the 49ers were the obvious if you miss out on the big defenses for the season in your draft. If you're just looking at Detroit in week 1, I have them on a ton of leagues because I'm not going to draft the defense early or for more than $1, and then I'll figure something out after this. Because I think, don't they have like the Packers in week 2 or something like that? But speaking of, I mentioned the Packers to say this, is I think that's the sneaky defense for me, is the Packers defense can exploit turnovers at some time. And if you talk about Jameis and his aggressiveness and his 1 and his 2 is Marquez Callaway and Traquan Smith, and it's not even just Jameis, it could just be the fact of you're asking Callaway and Smith to be 1s and 2s on any teams. We've already seen Traquan Smith struggle to be the top option with no Michael Thomas. It just might be Jameis being aggressive and the receivers being at fault for some of the interceptions. So I think that if the Packers are putting up points, the Saints defense has kind of like been falling apart with some injuries and stuff like that. It's still a decent unit, but it might be vulnerable to Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers is Aaron Rodgers. And if you get aggressive Jameis, couple interceptions, couple turnovers, and potential touchdowns. So that I like the Panthers call. The Packers would have been my sneaky call for this week.
Yeah, I have them at number 11. I like them as well. I just like the Panthers, maybe because of sneakiness. You know how I get with my rankings. That if I'm going to tell you that I like this,
our combined defensive rankings end up being like number 1 every single year.
It's true. The only thing I'm good at ranking is defenses.
Yeah, we meld them together, and it's the best ranked defenses ever.
Yeah, the position that requires the most luck in your favor is the only one I'm good at. So there we are. Those were the week 1 rankings, Jake. Season 8 off to a hot start.
We did it. Yeah, week 1 in the books. Wow.
Hopefully half these guys don't get hurt after we
I
finish
know.
the show.
You're going to be doing an hour-long update show next week.
Hey, content. There we go. So the schedule for next week, how to bet on the NFL with pro gambler Rob Pizzola is out on Sunday. There's a special Cuss Corner for Labor Day when people have the day off. Spread picks on Tuesday. Wednesday is going to be Showdown for the opening game, plus a rankings update. Thursday, full DraftKings picks. Friday is going to be me, Cam Stewart, and Rob Pizzola with the best bets for the week and a breakdown of the entire slate and what the updates to the injuries are. Plus, I'll have my injury updates and DraftKings ownership and prize picks over on the Fantasy Football Picks and Bets feed after the final injury reports come out on Friday. So please go subscribe to that right now and play in that contest. Go join Prize Picks right now and take advantage of the match deposit of up to $100. Code MMN at checkout or use the link that's down in the description. And you can play in the Prop Super Contest with me and Jake and everyone on Mayo Media Networks. So come join us. Come take our money away. All right? I'm Pat Mayo. Thank you all for watching. Smash a like on the way out. And I'll see you next time.
Pat Mayo Experience! Experience!